the show, Susan.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. So you worked on this book for 7 years. What was the impetus for you for doing all of this research on introversion?
Well, gosh, you know, the impetus for writing the book is that I've kind of been living the book my entire life. Since I was 4 years old, I think I've really been thinking about these questions, you know, obviously without having a language for it. But in terms of why the process took that 7 years, I knew that this was an incredibly counterintuitive thesis. So I felt like every single, the thesis being, introverts actually have this kind of secret power that no one is paying attention to, and it's grossly undervalued in this culture. And I knew it was so counterintuitive that I wanted every single assertion I made to be backed up by lots of research.
Yeah, there's absolutely, you note everywhere that everything came from. And it's absolutely filled with facts and studies. So I believe you, is what I'm saying. But you opened the book talking about Rosa Parks. What made her a good model for you to talk about the power of introverts?
Well, because I was struck by Rosa Parks, and I think she died before I actually started working on the book, but I still remember the day that she died and listening to the obituaries that were read on the radio and how struck I was by them. They were talking about how she had been timid, petite, soft-spoken, unassuming.
Yeah.
And I was struck by how, I guess I hadn't really thought before about what Rosa Parks must have been like, but I would have assumed that she was kind of this fierce, larger-than-life character, because you kind of think, we're conditioned to think that the kind of person who can affect that great a change and take that powerful a stand must also be very bold and very fierce and very outgoing, and she wasn't. And I was really struck by that, you know, the quiet power that she had. And then I started looking around and I realized, gosh, you know, so many of the transformative leaders of the 20th century had this kind of quiet, more unassuming style.
Yeah.
Many of our great creative minds, and yet our kids and us as grown-ups are sent the message that we shouldn't be that way.
Well, right. You talk at one point about sort of the winning of the culture of personality over the culture of character. And, you know, humility was something that it seems that Rosa Parks had in spades. And in this new sort of culture of the extrovert, humility is lost, right?
Yeah, I believe humility is lost. And I think it's getting worse with every passing moment, really. I mean, we know there are studies coming out now of young people that show that young people nowadays are much more self-centered and narcissistic and much less empathetic than they were in years past, and it's getting worse every year.
Why do you think that that's happening?
I think it's happening because this is a culture that so prizes self-presentation and that is basically coaching young people from the day they're very little to be thinking about, how do I present myself? How do I make myself larger than I really am? You know, the phrase larger than life is something that we are conditioned to aspire to in one way or another. We're not thinking as much about how can we be sometimes smaller than life is actually a good thing. You know, I think that shyness is a kind of civilizing force, because a shy person, what they're doing instinctively, they're saying, I care so much about you and your opinion that I'm giving you the power to make me feel bad if you don't think highly of me, because I care about you. It's a kind of instant regard for other people.
Yeah.
And yet, it's interesting to me, you know, one of the things I found in the year since my book came out is that, if anything, I think shyness is even a more pejorative term in this culture than introversion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and you talk in the book about the difference between shyness and introversion, whereas, can you define that a little bit?
Yeah, so shyness is about the kind of fear of social judgment, you know, the fear that other people are thinking poorly of you. So you're about to go on a date or a job interview or that kind of thing, you're unduly worried about it. That's a shy person. An introvert is somebody who gets their energy from who feels most alive, most energized in environments where there's just kind of less stuff going on, you know, quieter environments. So you can be an introvert without being shy, you can be shy without being an introvert, and then some people are both. And the book is really about both of these states of mind.
Well, I think, and we were talking a little bit earlier about this idea of selling yourself, and you talk in the book about groups like Toastmasters who teach people to sell their stories. And it felt to me like it was sort of lies winning over the truth a little bit in terms of the way that we relate to each other and how honest we are with each other.
Well, you know, it's funny. I have a kind of complicated relationship to that, because I wouldn't say that exactly. You know, I mean, my own experience was I had this book coming out, right, a year ago, And I knew I wanted to be able to go out and speak about it. I'm really passionate about the ideas, and I didn't want my fear standing in the way, right? So I actually started going to Toastmasters meeting. I embarked on what I called my year of speaking dangerously, where I was going to confront my fear of public speaking once and for all. And so I don't think I was being taught how to lie on stage. I actually think what happened to me was that I got more and more comfortable so that I could be telling the truth and more authentic on stage. So, I think these things are complicated.
Yeah, you sort of have to try to sell to be your authentic, to show your authentic self.
Yeah.
But it can't be so authentic that they see your fear. It's a tough line.
Yes, it is a really tough line. It is.
One of the things that you did go to the Tony Robbins Personal Power workshop.
Yes, I did.
Which sounded a little like hell. But did you get anything out of that experience? You did it for the book, for research.
I did it for the book. I don't know. One thing I got out of it was that it reminded me how much I really like to do aerobics. Because I don't know if you know what these seminars are like, but you're in a room with 4,000 other people from 9 in the morning until midnight. I kid you not, you don't take a break that entire time. You were there, you're eating at your chair the whole time, and you're also dancing throughout the day. It's like you do a little exercise, and then you go out into the aisle and you do a crazy dance to some top 40 song. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I actually really liked aerobics. I've got to start doing more of this when I get back home. So I got that out of it.
That was worth your $900. Absolutely, a reminder to go to aerobics.
It was also, but in terms of the implicit message that was being taught at the seminar, aside from the dancing in the aisles, it was kind of horrifying because, for example, we had to do this one exercise where Tony Robbins said to us, I want you to try to greet somebody, pair up with somebody and shake your hands as if you're introducing yourselves to them for the first time. And you should pretend that you're about to do a sales deal, and if you don't close this deal, everybody you care about is going to die like pigs in hell.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Did it change the way that you shook hands?
No.
Have that in your head? No.
No, it didn't.
You were crying while it happened because you were imagining your family dying.
I was really? I don't like going through life that way. I don't like the idea of this is the persona you should be presenting.
Well, it's interesting because they talk a lot about using the personal power stuff in business, and you also went to Harvard Business School, which I found fascinating. And there was some advice that you listed in the book that I was just appalled by, that they get from Harvard Business School. One is, speak with conviction. Even if you believe something only 55%, say it as if you believe it 100%. And the second is, don't think about the perfect answer. It's better to get out there and say something than never get your voice in. Which I thought, what does that do to businesses when people are just spouting and not thinking about it?
Yeah, so this is a very problematic and complicated thing. I went to Harvard Business School at first because I was writing this book about introversion, and I was chatting with a friend of mine who had graduated from there, and he said, you must go spend some time at HBS. It is the spiritual capital of extroversion. So you've got to go check it out. And so I did, and it's a school that is training our future leaders, business leaders and civic leaders. And the idea behind what you were just talking about is that if you are a leader, there are going to be times where you have imperfect information, and then you're faced with this really complex question of, should you act in the face of the imperfect information, or should you wait to get more? And if you wait, you do run the risk of having people start to lose confidence and people losing morale. So it's a complicated question. And Harvard Business School comes down, I would say, pretty squarely on the side of people will lose morale, you'd better act, and so we are going to train you to project this kind of certainty. Mm-hmm. And we're going to train you in class. Classes are graded 50% based on class participation. And
I just wanted the percentage to be higher than 55%. If you're going to act, I just wanted it to be 70%. You know what I'm saying? Rather than 55% sure.
Right,
but
right.
I didn't attend Harvard Business School. That is obvious by my car. It's a Civic. And another thing that you talk about in business is this shift with businesses to group dynamics, to open spaces. What for you, in a country that sort of embraces that collaboration and groupthink. What are the downfalls of those ideas?
Well, the downside, I mean, there's so many, actually. How much time do we have? First of all, we know that this isn't just introverts, but extroverts also produce more ideas and better ideas. We know this from 40 years of research. When they are brainstorming on their own, sitting by yourself, just thinking of as many ideas as you can come up with, you come up with better ideas when you're on your own. So we also need the process of exchanging ideas. It's not to say that group work is entirely useless, but we need much more of a hybrid process than we have now. And then for introverts in particular, they really, really require chunks of solitude in their day, and when they're not getting it, they're not thinking as deeply or as creatively. So we've got this entire educational system that is now based around group work, an entire workforce that's based around herding people into teams and compelling them to work collectively all the time, in big open plan offices. And we're not getting the best of people's brains by doing that. So it's not in anybody's interest.
Well, and you also talked about groupthink in terms of the loudest voice being heard instead of the most informed voice being heard, and that's problematic in terms of getting to the right outcome.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you think of a group situation that you've been in recently, and it could be anything. It could be a recent PTA meeting or whatever, a jury that you were sitting on. You see this dynamic of groups tending to follow the opinion of the most assertive person in the room. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy when you think about that if the objective is to come up with the best idea or the most creative idea, it's crazy to think that the answer to that would be to gather a group of people together and see what comes out, because really you're just hearing generally from one person, that most assertive person whose idea kind of percolates to the top.
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting to me that you wrote this book and you did this TED Talk, and it was amazing. If you can find it, just go to I think it's TED.com and do a search on Susan Cain. And you were just extremely comfortable, it seemed, doing that. But but you have written this book, and now you have to go around the country and talk to big groups of people about introversion. How has that been for you? Do you feel like more of an extrovert now? How has that changed you?
It's so funny. People ask me this a lot. Do you feel like more of an extrovert? No, not at all. I'm more comfortable with speaking than I used to be. But in terms of, no offense to all of you, but like on any given day, I would much rather be sitting at home with my family or, sitting by myself in a cafe with my laptop. I have come to really love the speaking, and especially the ability that it gives me to connect with people and get ideas across. But no, I think you can get comfortable, but still kind of maintain your underlying stripes.
Yeah.
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 And I was also struck before when you were talking about Michael Stipe saying, he kind of disconnected from the whole experience.
Yeah.
Because people ask me all the time, what was it like to be up there on the TED stage? And the answer is, I have no idea.
You weren't there.
I really have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're on video. It was you. I totally saw you. It's interesting because you were saying you were feeling like it's kind of getting worse in terms of the way that we're going, in terms of extroverts and introverts. And I don't know if have you read the work of Sherry Turkle? She wrote a book called The Flight from Conversation, and it's about how technology has sort of taught us that solitude is a problem that needs to be solved, and we solve it with things like our phones. And what do you think is lost when we lose time alone to ourselves to think?
Well, I think that we've always known that there's a kind of transcendent power to solitude. I mean, all of our religions have known this. You go into poetry, you have William Wordsworth wandering lonely as a cloud. He was doing that for a reason. So we're losing our ability to kind of connect with a deeper part of ourselves. And then there's just the phenomenon of the fact that we are all such intensely social creatures. Introverts too, all social creatures. So we instinctively pick up on other people's ideas. So you can't be around other people without kind of picking up on what they're thinking and feeling, which makes it literally impossible to truly know what you're thinking and feeling. So if you really want to be creative, you have to be willing to absent yourself some of the time. And this is why, when psychologists look at who have been the most intensely creative people over time, they almost always find people with streaks of introversion, people who can go and remove themselves.
Yeah. Well, the book is packed with information and incredibly helpful. The book is The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. The author is Susan CAIN. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
so
much for
enjoyed
joining
it.
us.
I really
Susan
appreciate
CAIN,
it.
everybody.
Thank you.